Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome Alan Kornberg, who is GFAS member of the Board of Directors, and I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to you now, Alan.
Well, thank you, Robin, and I appreciate having the opportunity to give this 10-on-10 webinar on best practice around Board of Directors and governance function. I really appreciate it. My first slide, the cover slide, of course, speaks to my being a current member of the GFAS board, and I should also mention that I have been a member of a number of different not-for-profit boards over the years as board members and as a board member, and also have served in leadership roles with a number of charities, and then so hence have engaged with boards as well, and as an executive director of 3 charities, have worked for several boards. So I will give you a combination of, if you will, what's generally understood to be best practice and some of my own experiences as well, which may be helpful to you. As we go to the next slide, the second slide, which is titled GFAS Board Standards, I thought it would be best if we started with my paraphrase. This is a light paraphrase or a light editing of GFAS's own standards around board practice. You'll find this, as you know, within our animal care standards, within our sanctuary verification and accreditation standards. There are different standards based on species, based on taxonomy, and for each of those standards, as you look at them, embedded in those standards are also appropriate governance and business and finance practice. So these board standards are found there. The first bullet then on this slide too speaks to boards need to have at least 3 members. That's a bare minimum, and of course, if regulation or law in one's jurisdiction requires more, then one needs to, at minimum, follow that, and at least 1 board member should not be related to the executive director or founder. The second and third bullets speak to general best practice, behaving responsibly, that board members have a duty to carry out function in the best interest of the charity or sanctuary in our case, and so on. Of particular importance is the penultimate or next to the last bullet on this slide, which speaks to having regularly scheduled meetings and that these meetings being documented with minutes that are then approved. We'll talk more about meeting frequency later, but boards must meet from time to time, and they must document their action items and their decisions. And then finally on this slide, you'll see the last bullet speaks to what probably comes across to you as common sense, that for any sanctuary that aims to be accredited or verified by GFAS or to be reaccredited by us, clearly the board needs to, as a board, speak to its support of standards that GFAS puts forward, or else we shouldn't be doing this together. So, of course, we expect the board to, in general, agree with our standards, and we appreciate that. We'll now go to the third slide, which is titled Keyboard Roles. You'll see a number of bullets here. The first 4 bullets are typical 101 board responsibilities for any board, including sanctuary boards, but really for any board. And so boards, first and foremost, hire or approve, monitor, give guidance to the executive director, to the CEO of a charity, and in situations where there are problems, give guidance, advice, conflict resolution, and if necessary, need to replace the executive director, which hopefully happens in a vanishingly small number of cases for us, but of course that's a board function that needs to be identified. The board, as the boss, if you will, of the executive director, the CEO, determines her or his compensation. The board sets the sanctuary's broad-level strategic direction and approves an annual budget and is responsible for financial oversight. I also mentioned in the second to the last, the main bullet, that particularly in small charities, in smaller sanctuaries, but really with any charity, boards and board members frequently do some hands-on work, and so they might support animal care, they might support nuts and bolts work on the sanctuary, they might have a finance or legal or other background or a fundraising background that's helpful beyond standard board responsibilities. And I mentioned here as well that most boards play a role around fundraising, and in my view that's appropriate and to be encouraged and good practice. I end with saying that it's not uncommon with many of our sanctuaries and many charities, in animal protection otherwise, that the executive director is also the founder of the charity, and this frequently changes the dynamic. Informally, not formally, the executive director, founder or otherwise, still works for the board, but sometimes it almost feels like when it's a founder-based organization that the board works for the executive director. And so those are dynamics that need to be worked through, certainly in a formal sense and really in a best practice kind of sense. The board is responsible for the overall strategy, finance, and leadership of the organization. We'll go to the next slide, slide number 4, ideal board membership makeup. Again, we've talked about how there needs to be at least 3 members of the board. And every board, every NGO or non-governmental organization, every charity functions somewhat differently. In general, good guidance, good practice is to have around 8 to 12 board members. And that's a broad brush comment. Again, every NGO, every charity behaves somewhat differently. When you only have 3 or 4 board members, you frequently don't have enough people to get the work done and to raise thinking to the highest level. When there's more than 12 or so, not everybody has a chance to have their voice be heard. So 8 to 12 is a healthy number to target for, but again, every charity runs its own way. And I'd also mention that BoardSource, which is a U.S.-based charity whose mission is to support not-for-profit charities, likes the 8 to 12 number and has 8 members at last count on its own board. People talk about boards and diversity a lot. Diversity comes in many ways and many stripes. There's, of course, racial, ethnic, gender diversity, age diversity. It's good to have some younger people on boards as well. Many boards tend to have people that are predominantly middle-aged or older. Constituency representation, and, of course, functional roles. Again, finance, law, fundraising, could be communication, social media. Obviously, animal care in our space is a positive to be well represented. And I like to think and like to say that every board member should feel like she or he is involved in fundraising in one way, shape, or form. For any charity, especially for the leadership, we are all fundraisers. Moving on to the next slide, slide number 5, self-assessment. Since boards don't have a boss of their own, they are the ultimate boss for a charity, they should be aware of and practice some self-assessment. 2 kinds of tools that are frequently used. One is to inventory the board's demographics, its skill sets, and there's a number of different basic survey tools. We can send you one if you ask us to help with this. And when one completes this, when one has each board member complete a demographic and skills and experience survey, it frequently will identify some areas of relative thinness and can provoke some healthy discussions within the board in terms of any subsequent board development, board recruitment. Additionally, there are tools, sometimes very simple tools, and we use these ourselves within GFAS to do a board self-assessment. Again, because the board doesn't have a boss, it's good for the board to self-assess its own practice. And again, we can supply you with some tools if you like to do a self-assessment. What typically happens is 1 or 2 or 3 areas come up as being less strong than other board functional responsibilities, and that sometimes provides a board with the emphasis to go forward and work further on some areas of relative improvement opportunity. Our next slide then, slide number 6, is meeting frequency. Well, how often should a board meet? Well, it depends. In most jurisdictions, you've got to meet at least once a year or you're not in compliance with statute or regulation. I think at least 4 times a year for most boards of most small organizations is healthy. Many of our sanctuaries have boards whose members live in the same region, so it's reasonably easy, recognizing that people are busy, it's reasonably easy to get people together for board meetings. If that's not possible for some of your meetings, then meetings can be done with technology, Skype, or simply telephone conference calls. I do think that boards should sit in the same room at least twice a year, and ideally at least 4 times a year. Some boards that are very hands-on will meet monthly, and that can be a good thing as well. Moving on to our next slide, slide number 7, terms and term limits, sometimes an awkward area. For many of us, we have a small number of dedicated people. They remain on our boards, and it's awkward to think about when somebody should rotate off. It's not a bad idea to have terms for board members and for board officers as well. This also allows someone, let's say somebody's been on the board for, let's say you have a 3-year term, somebody's been on the board for nearly 6 years, and they're feeling like they're kind of sort of getting burned out. They want to leave on a high note and not just sort of drop it, that I've got to leave now. Having terms facilitates an easier exit, a more win-win kind of exit frequently for people that have done their duty, and it's time to look to someone else. Similarly, that can be valuable for board leadership, particularly for the president or chair of the board. It's a good thing for many boards, not always, but frequently, not to have the same person be the chair of the board till the end of days. I also think I want to add here that for most charities, for our sanctuaries and other charities, it's typically healthy. Again, every charity is different, but it's typically healthy if the executive director and the chair of the board are different people. It allows for raising the level of thinking, and it allows for separation of responsibility and some better oversight. Slide 8 of 10, our last main content slide, speaks to advisory councils. Advisory councils are not boards. They don't have a formal governing role, so they have less responsibility. You don't have to have one. It's entirely optional. They can be a training ground for board members. They can be a vehicle to bring in individuals for special purposes, special functions, such as specific animal care knowledge in our space, scientific knowledge, again, finance, legal, fundraising, other kinds of support areas. Some charities have advisory councils distinct from their boards that focus entirely on fundraising. And advisory councils, so for some of us, can also be a place to highlight celebrities or community leaders or people with great knowledge and respect in our movement who connect to our charity, to our sanctuary, but don't want to have the heavy lift and the responsibility of being on the board, and it allows us to showcase to the public that these well-respected people are connected to our sanctuary. Well, that brings us to near close. In terms of questions, as this is a not in live time or real-time webinar, I'll give you our contact info in a minute. Should you have any questions, as a committed member of the GFAS family, I would love to hear from you at any point in time. So please do reach out to me or any of the GFAS staff. And you'll see on the last slide, slide 10 of 10, I give a little bit of contact information. My GFAS email address, alan@sanctuaryfederation.org. I also list 3 GFAS websites, the main website, and then sites for our standards, and the site where this and other webinars are listed. And finally, I list the BoardSource website. BoardSource is a terrific charity that provides support for not-for-profit boards. Some of their advice is offered for free, and some requires a modest fee. And so should you ever be so inclined, I give that to you as a resource as well. I thank you for your time and attention and for your support of GFAS and for the wonderful work that you do in furthering our joint mission. Thank you very much.